Welcome, everyone, to What the Force, and welcome to episode 9 of Andor Declassified. Nobody's listening. And with me to talk about this episode and all of the others in the series is my good friend and yours, Alex Kane.
Thank you for having me back. Hopefully somebody's listening to this, right?
I hope so.
Sorry.
I mean, this is a very clear, parallel to the line from Rogue One.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Which is, of course, Cassian saying to Jyn, do you think anybody's listening? I do. Someone's out there. Yeah.
I love it. It always feels like a prayer, but like a prayer to your fellow man, I guess.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on in this episode. This episode was, again, written by Beau Willimon, who we talked about last episode in great detail, and directed by Toby Haynes, who also directed 1, 2, 3 of Andor. Beau Willimon, I gotta say, he has some excellent quotes. He's very quotable, this guy. The one I actually pulled for this episode, I wanted to say another quote because I love this guy. I love how he thinks about the world and how quotable he is. But the quote I pulled was, "The creative act is fundamentally a selfish one. We all have our biases, our prejudices, our political views, our agendas as people. But I don't think that's why you get up in the morning and bang your head against a wall all day long trying to figure out the irrationality of the human soul." I love him. He also has this great quote about how everything is politics and how navigating every social situation is just politics. Oh, yep. He gets it.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, I love you. I don't say that often to writers of Star Wars.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he gets it. And his thoughts, his introspection is exactly what we've needed in Star Wars for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah, the brutal honesty of we've got this, strong political viewpoint, but art is something more personal, and then hopefully the tension there, creates something honest and interesting, and certainly we found that with Andor.
Exactly.
Big time.
There was an interesting comment that was brought up on my Discord. I wanted to talk about last week's episode a little bit and the kind of this arc in general before we get into the episode and what happened in this one and what we loved about it, of course. But Tim on my Discord, on the What the Force Discord, actually said, so I haven't finished listening to the new What the Force episode yet. He was kind of midway, I think. So have you talked about this? You mentioned the perspective of each episode forces us to experience and then you talked about the tunnel. Is there anything here about the journey of life, like the birth through the tunnel, training, education, and then where the episode ends with sort of death? It's really, really interesting. And I actually think that one of the things that's very rarely talked about with the Road of Trials, which Andor ends up going on through the initiation from a mythic journey perspective, is how much it is a new birth, an opposite birth, an upside down, if we were talking about Stranger Things, birth into a whole new reality where everything is turned upside down and you almost have to relearn the rules of the road from this opposite weird view. And it ends in a death and transformation and a rebirth. And so, yeah, there is a lot to say about that and how it is playing out in the prison on Narkina 5.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting sort of the same story, retold within the same series, which is fun.
Yeah.
With Andy Serkis, which, we'll get to all that. But, wow, God, Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
I also wanted to talk a little bit more about the belly of the whale and what this period of time, the Road of Trials, why why tell this? Right? Why is this so like symbolically and mythically important to tell it? And why is there so much consistent symbolism in how it's being told? If the Star Wars writers are at all engaged with the amazing library at Skywalker Ranch, then they will have read enough to know this, right? To know this fundamentally. And sometimes it's just, hey, you're smart enough to listen to your subconscious and speak in the language of the night from an Ursula K. Le Guin perspective. What does Joseph Campbell have to say about this? Because that's always where George went to first and understood his framework for the story. The idea that the passage of the magical threshold is transient is a transit into a sphere of rebirth, is symbolized by the worldwide womb image of the belly of the whale. The hero, instead of conquering the power of the threshold, is swallowed into the unknown and would have appeared to have died. Right? So that's the key. Okay. To the outside world, Andor is dead. No one can find him. No one knows where he is. And the key to this is because to be truly transformed, one must cease to live as your former self. You have to literally die as a personality to be transformed. So he was the thief. He was self-serving. That part of him has to be stripped away and died through the suffering and being in the suffering with others. And this is all so that he can bring what he learns through this transformation, the care of others. He literally holds Olaf in a Pieta position this episode, right? So he has pity for Olaf. So does Andy Serkis. Like they are paired, like you just said, right? So that he can bring it to the rebellion and he can bring it to Ferrix and he can bring it to the galaxy, right? That hope, which again gets transferred to Leia's hands.
Yep.
Right? It's all there. So that's the elixir, right? Is the we recognize the suffering of others. And so we try to help others and reduce the suffering and allow them to escape the wheel in a samsara Buddhist perspective of suffering.
Yep. Last week you said the word catabasis, unless that was 2 weeks ago, but I believe it was last week.
It was this last week, which is his lowest point, right? To go down into the underworld. And the catabasis is literally that moment you die before being kind of resurrected. Yeah.
A word in my notes for this week's episode is techno hell. So I'm thinking about how he's sort of in hell, and you have the his buddy from Rogue One, whose name is escaping me, but it starts like an M or something.
Melky or Melchi?
Yeah, exactly. Like he keeps saying things like,
"You're already dead.
Death is freedom. Death is like equivalent to getting out of prison at this point." So I mean, they really are just kind of like in the inferno, which from like a Buddhist standpoint, is life in the material world that we live every day.
My good friend Lady Valkyrie on Twitter said that it was very Kafka-like, right? So all of the dystopian realistic hells on Earth that you explore in Kafka. And I have to say, I am brutally underread on Kafka. I've heard the words Kafka's Guide to Motorcycle Repair, I guess is a word. I don't know. I am not well read on Kafka, so I can't really speak to that. But from what I've Googled, fair.
Yeah. I think for me, I sort of, whatever familiarity I have is through like Philip K. Dick, who kind of like riffed on Kafka, I think is fair to say. And, just these ideas of like, his famous quote that I love is like, it's sometimes an appropriate response to reality to go insane. Like things like that, where, the sort of post World War II 20th century that a lot of these famous writers or living in was, it was like bureaucratic hell. It was Syril's world and Dedra's world.
It's like the whole basis of Catch-22 as a book, which is that
probably
like if you go insane, you'll get discharged, and if you or you get dishonorably discharged, and if you complete all of your missions, they count you as insane, and so you'll get dishonorably discharged, and you won't be free of the. It's like this weird sense of like purgatory, and my question is, does purgatory have 7 levels? Because certainly in Dante's Inferno, there's 9.
Yeah, I don't know enough about purgatory, but
it feels, very like it's nicer than hell, but it's not quite heaven.
Yeah.
There is some sort of interesting things symbolically still going on. And the 7 sevens, my good friend Freya Adjacent was able to prove, and we totally agreed on so many cool stuff, but she screenshotted it and saw that there was 7 platforms. So there's 7 buildings on this
prison
planet.
Installations, like the silos. Yeah.
And my question is there actually 7 planets in Narkina?
Because 5, yeah.
Because of 5, right?
Yeah, there might be 7. Yep,
it's really
seems likely.
So, we are continuing just like what we said, exactly what would happen in this arc, which is like he's going to reach his lowest point. I argue he met his catabasis in this episode, but we'll have to kind of see if it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah, what's it? Like, I don't want to leap ahead, but it's interesting that he's already recognizing his own journey in others. Mm-hmm. He reacts to Kino, Andy Serkis's character, and he sees on his face, he's like, oh, like I was just there. Like, I know exactly what you're going through. Which is such a fun aspect of this 3-part arc that we're sort of 2/3 of the way through.
There's a few really consistent symbols that are happening through this episode that I want to talk about. And one of them is mirrors.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Mirrors, huh?
Yeah. We don't see any mirrors, but there are mirrors, right? So Kino is a mirror of Cassian, right? Cassian sees his past through Kino. And there's a mirror in the prison that allows them to see their future, like almost like a magic mirror. It's really
you
cool.
Mean the other level? You mean, or
yes,
like level 2?
Yes, we'll talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
But it's purposeful and it's good, and so the writing in this episode specifically is very, very thoughtful, heavily symbolic, and not necessarily always in the visual symbolism. Sometimes it's just in how the concepts are presented. And so I'm really, really excited to talk about it. How did you feel about this episode?
I mean, I loved it. It's horrific, It's sort of, Andor has been mature and sort of, a terrifying vision of life under Empire, since the beginning. But certainly this was the episode where I was like, damn, like this is intense. I saw Zero Dark 30 in a movie theater, and it's like, this felt like that, when Bix is getting tortured, it's very, the United States Empire post 9/11, like it's it's very heavy, and it it's playing with big ideas well. They're sort of taking the baton from George Lucas and saying, like, was Star Wars a little too subtle for you here? Like, let's evolve. And I think this is like the most emotionally sort of affecting episode thus far for me, probably just because of Andy Serkis, like, is so surprising in it.
He's excellent in this.
He's so good. Yeah. Like, I didn't expect to what he does. I didn't expect all this from him, from his character, for whatever reason. He's just a surprising
I don't think that I ever said that he would die. I was hoping that he would turn,
I don't know how far I got along But yeah, I didn't think of like redemption. I didn't think of death either.
It's not redemption, right? Like he was a
No, not
prisoner
yet.
in the system. And again, this show does micro versions of macro things and
Yeah.
macro versions of micro things, and then
Yep.
shows them kind of like in an echo. We've seen this.
Yeah.
We've seen this multiple times already. So
hmm
don't be surprised if it happens again. So we have a situation where Andy Serkis's character like just automatically flips sides when we see that he realizes the game is rigged. There is no, and I think this is the Kafka-esque stuff. Lady V, you'll correct me later. Right? The game is rigged. There is no way out. There is no answer, and he sees it like by the end of the episode, which is perfect. And they play the through line of his awakening to that there is no way out, because although remnants of the Empire survive, right, after the Death Star 2 blows up, right, we know that because of the First Order and all of that, most of the Empire has to actually kind of think the Empire sucks by the end of Return of the Jedi to have any sort of semblance of society after, right? Or it would just exist, continued on, or a new emperor would take his place. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we have to kind of show how even the people who are the taskmasters, who are in place or in there, are actually still also prisoners. And that's me building on a point that I'm going to get to later.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, but where do we start the episode? Bix is being interrogated by Dedra.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, intense. Yeah. It's very she's like grabbing her face and squeezing, and just there's a lot of like sweat and a lot of like her saying things that are what someone in the military performing an interrogation would probably say, just like very manipulative, and playing the good cop bad cop with in which the bad cop is like a professional torture guy, like
I actually felt like this was such an interesting conversation. Like, Dedra is obviously very skilled at being intimidating, but she kept on using a metaphor. What was the metaphor she used?
Well,
you are a fish. Are you a fish? Or are you catching the fish, and then you throw out your net and you just assume all of your catch are fishes, but are you a fish or are you something else? Because I only want fish, Okay. We just talked about how thematically for Andor, he is in the belly of the whale. Yeah. She keeps on talking about fish, like you're catching these fish, and so it's very similar thematically, that she thinks that she is catching this large fish, right, bringing it in, but in truth Dedra and everybody else is actually trapped in this monster, and she doesn't see it.
Sure.
Right, she thinks, similar to Kino, that as she is helping, she is reducing her sentence or getting something out of it, or protecting the prison or protecting the Empire. But, it's down to that classic prequels line. She thinks that she's the person catching the fish, but there's always a bigger fish. There's always a bigger fish than you, Dedra.
Yeah.
Right.
She says, "I try," is like her great line. Like, she like comes in close and whispers in her ear, like, "I try," because that's the trap of like of it all. It's like, if you are within like an empire or like a big,
like, I'm doing the right thing.
Entity.
I donate to charity.
Yeah, well, or like Syril, in like the first couple episodes, like just that idea that like institutions have a tendency to crumble, and capitalism works according to like the laws of entropy, and like the exponential growth is like not going to work out for it. But but it's like, well, if I just work a little bit longer and do what Elon Musk wants me to do and just try a little harder, skip my lunch break, kiss my boss's ass a little harder, I will fix it all. It's all going to work.
The same goes for the Empire. If I just try to work my butt off, the Empire will be safer and all of these things will be eliminated and I'll be rewarded in all of this, right? Yeah. And sometimes there's things that you just can't account for. Right? Mm-hmm. The world itself, there is entropy, as you said, and things do fall apart. And in the end, this scene is really brilliant because as much as she's doing this like intimidation dance that is representative of the Empire, like play along with the Empire. We will protect you. We will help you. You don't have to suffer. Bix calls her out and says, "You're not going to believe anything I say anyways. Why don't you just get to the torture?" Probably not. Yeah.
So good.
When was the last time you spoke to Cassian Andor? And so, oh my goodness. And then the worst thing you can do is bore me. So right now, Dedra is representing sort of the heart and the soul of how the Empire will end up operating end to end, right? It doesn't matter if you're innocent. It doesn't matter if you tell the truth right away. You're going to end up suffering. That's key, right?
Yeah.
But I also want to say that Dedra herself doesn't realize that she is also trapped in the net.
Right. She's just a cog. Like she's nothing. She's drunk on the power of her current station, which is like significant. She's powerful, but like at the end of the day,
And this is not a popular theory, I gotta say, but I'm going to put it out there very early on in the episode here that both Dedra and Syril, as I have said in every episode, will be joining the rebellion by the end of the 24 episode arc. And a lot of people don't agree with me. I am actually quite shocked that a lot of people don't agree with me. They find Syril, and we'll get to like his character flaws later on in the episode.
Sure.
But I actually think that they're telling these stories with a very specific purpose because there are examples of people who have been caught up entirely in bureaucracy. And it's very Star Wars to say that everybody has the right to turn around and make the right choice at some point. And we need to, we both, for both Dedra and Syril, we have identified with them and we have pitied them and we have felt sorry for them. And now we have also hated them. And I think that's really, really key to showing people a template version of how, you can hate somebody who's within the machine, but they're still stuck. They're still a prisoner within the machine. And again, we're talking about microcosm, macrocosm with Kino Loy or Andy Serkis's character. We will see them reflected in that story, echo out to these people because they're not the type of people that are going to either be satisfied with the Empire in the end and who will be smashed by the Empire given a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of see some of the groundwork for smashing Dedra in this episode.
Sure. Yeah. And also, I mean, there's just like this idea that like an empire is like a machine. It's not human. Vader is like the kind of famous metaphor for that, more machine. And like
technological terror of the Death Star. Yeah.
And Dedra has like the boss, Partizag or whatever his name is, who kind of favors her. And like, that's great, I guess. But like, if that relationship goes away, she's adrift and it's just her and like the job or whatever. And like, I think Syril has already reached that point where he's like, I played by the book. I was a part of the institution, trying to be good cop, doing my duty for the whatever, order and peace. And it wasn't until like he like came face to face with her and had that like interrogation session basically that he's like, oh, I see my purpose in a human being. He's seeing like, oh, like relationships can feel differently than the one I have with my mother, who just tells me what a piece of shit I am at the breakfast table. I think that's leading somewhere where it's like, okay, he sees, relationships being, valuable in a way that your job is never going to be, right?
Yeah.
For most people.
I have thoughts about that too. I'm excited to get to that, but let's continue on. So we go back to Andor ever so briefly, and we get the whole setup for the whole episode and like the heart of the show, which is Olaf, right? And him struggling because he only has 41 shifts left.
Yeah, and then so they reshuffle like their assembly line, right? They switch places and stuff. Is that here?
Yeah, that's there. Yeah. So like Cassian takes over for him, and Kino notices this and is like, "Oh, that was a smart move." And Cassian like asks him one of the questions, like, are they going to be replacing that guy soon? Because he's still trying to get the timing of the prison down and all of that, right?
Oh, right.
And Kino's like, I'm not going to answer that. You know what happens. And he tries to compliment Cassian on taking that initiative, and Cassian gives the credit to one of the other people on the table.
Oh, right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's also subtle, but 42 is actually the shift that he has left. Right, because he's still in the middle of his 42nd shift.
Oh,
so it's a 7 multiplier.
Sure.
Right, because why not?
Yeah.
So Cassian is like being very squirrely around Kino, but still asking him all of those questions, and it's enough that Kino is like on edge about him.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to Bix and Dr. Gorsht, who we get introduced to, and he's like this, I love my job torturing people, guys.
Yeah, he's very much like the Bond villain who's like, I'm so proud of my like evil method here, like let me explain to you how it works, because I'm proud of my torture device.
I'm proud of my death screams of sentient children.
He kind of looks like the Dr. Frankenstein from like the classic 1941 or whatever Frankenstein.
And he also is super young, like they chose like a really young actor for this character instead of kind of the old creepy doctors that you tend to get who do torture situations. He's like, nah, I'm like fresh out of evil medical school.
Yeah. Yeah, he looks like he's out of like a World War I movie where he's like in the trenches or something, like very sort of baby-faced. Yeah.
Can we talk about how this has got to be the worst podcast in existence and how now they've made sound designers evil?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes you crazy and is horrible to hear. That's the gist of it.
Yeah.
We don't hear it.
I love that. Yeah, that I'm like obsessed with that when we're sort of like just watching it and like you almost don't even notice at first, but you're really just hearing Bix's basically like anguished response.
Yeah.
That's such a brilliant choice. Like
not allowing us to hear it is so good because whatever we imagine is going to be worse than what we could hear.
Yeah.
Because it's so horrible that you can't actually like imagine how horrible it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it made me think of that like classic like horror movie truism about like the alien and the original Alien. You like very rarely see that thing like in frame because it's it's scarier when you're just sort of imagining it. And
same with Jaws. Jaws is way scarier when you can't actually see the shark.
Yeah. Oh, and the Blair Witch Project, I put in my notes, like you never see the witch ever in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's one of the scariest films ever made because of that. Like, you don't get an answer to what is reality, what is this thing, and
so your nightmares and your imagination gets to go wild on it, right?
What do these sound? Yeah, what's this thing sound like? We don't know. It sounds pretty bad.
It really reminded me of the Holdo maneuver, like sort of in a way, how we didn't get sound for that until after. and we just saw the impact. And that's sort of what we get with Bix's reaction. We just see the impact, and then we get the sound. And the scream happens, the door slams, which is very classic Star Wars, like we're going to slam the door on the torture. And then we immediately cut to Andor and the screeching like drill or like, you know, giant power tool screeching. It was such a good cut. And it kind of shows like, you know, there are different types of torture.
It's kind of the same shot that you get with like Poe in The Force Awakens when he's being sort of mind probed or whatever. Yeah. You know, where is the droid? And Poe just sort of gazes into the camera and screams with his face all red. It's pretty similar shot. It's good stuff.
It's very classically Star Wars. Like it just feels like the moment when Princess Leia is about to be tortured by the like probe droid or whatever.
Little droid,
yeah. And the door shuts immediately. Like it's just like whatever happens behind this door is way worse than you can imagine. So it's a good way to not show stuff and also to make it work on a horror perspective. You don't need to see everything. Right? Yeah. Like that's what's being said by the director and the writer here, is that whatever your mind says is probably worse than we can show you.
It's almost like they looked at that scene really carefully with Vader and Leia in the Death Star cell for this whole episode, because that droid, kind of what's scary about it, other than like the sound it makes, is it has like a little hypodermic needle on the front of it. And then we get like a really difficult scene in this episode with a hypodermic needle as well.
Yeah.
With the sort of morphine.
They definitely get Star Wars. Like right? Like
they can pretend not to want to do the sort of fan service thing, and like, but clearly, they care understand about like Rogue One, but
they understand the building blocks too.
Yeah.
Right, in a way that doesn't feel like you're trying to take your toys out to play. This feels like you've absorbed it, right? Like, so very much like that quote, it's not the product that inspires, it's the creator that absorbs, right? Like, so they've absorbed Star Wars. They've absorbed the things that they are trying to bestow upon the audience. And it's being bestowed through the excellent writing of somebody who understands, like, I take this darkness from deep inside of me and I throw it up on the screen. Not I try to pretend like I know what I'm doing.
Like everything is so, kind of judicious and thoughtfully done.
Yeah.
Like there's a moment in the like very sort of dark techno music in the prison when Cassian's like using the file to like slice the little pipe.
He's like, I gotta go take my run. And he's going to the fresher. He's going to the bathroom, but he's going to go and cut that one pipe.
Yeah. I swear the melody in the score there sounded like one of the Princess Leia themes to me, but maybe I'm crazy. But, you notice occasional little touches like that, and it stands out because they do it so rarely, I guess.
I'll re-listen to it for you.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I mean, it was purely a feeling of like, man, that sounded like a sort of like Leia New Hope kind of theme. Right before he files the pipe, I think. But yeah.
So what do you think he's doing in there?
Well, I would assume he's like trying to make some kind of like trigger, like a switch that they can like use to cause a distraction when they want to like jump on the elevator. That's the other thing about
like
this,
rewire something or cut open something that causes like the need for maintenance people to come, or
because
like that. Yeah,
him and his buddy there are like very carefully observing like the lift and how you don't get fried on anything that moves, and they're sort of like really figuring out the technical like engineering of the prison. And so to me it's just like if you can cause like some kind of alarm to go off down the hall, that's an opportunity to get on that lift and get out, if you've only got to wrestle one or two guys or whatever. So
it feels a little Shawshank Redemption to me.
Oh, very much. Yeah. I think about that movie all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Shawshank Redemption is just a brilliant movie if you've never watched it. but just how like slow and thoughtful the main character is with his escape, and he never gives away the escape.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if you act like somebody who's going to try to escape, like it's probably not going to go really well. But yeah, like even since like 2 episodes ago, I think, or maybe just the last one, I had that thought of like, you know, it's a similar thing where Tim Robbins' character, Andy in Shawshank, like, you know, he's an innocent guy. He didn't do it.
Yeah.
But here he is in prison. And he's going to be there a long time, and it's going to be hell. And then, we get a little bit more Shawshank in this episode.
There is more Shawshank,
Yeah.
Feels like we've been in this prison for a really long time. It's only been 2 episodes.
Yeah, basically, 2 episodes,
Yeah, but they do a really good job of showing us the monotony of the day-to-day and everything, right? So it feels a lot longer, and we feel very attached to these characters, even though we haven't known them very long. I also want to point out one sort of thing about you only have 41 shifts left tomorrow. Immediately when they said that about Olaf, I was like, oh no, he's 1 day from retirement.
Yes, I had that thought too.
It's a TV trope called retiree. Right. So
sure,
you cannot survive your own retirement. And typically, like, it's used by writers to have you attached to a character. But if they were set to retire anyways, psychologically, they're already dead to us. It's a weird thing. Right. So this character is meant to leave. And so they're already dead to us. But they gave us enough time that it's like, although it's about the time of the first time jump that we had in Cassian, where they showed us the time difference. So, like, specifically, it is tomorrow for us, but also it's not, right? So it does 2 things, which is it gives us the foreboding. Most people are aware of this TV trope, right? Like that if somebody says, I'm retiring tomorrow, they're never going to get out of there alive.
Yeah.
Right. And then also it does something super interesting. So again, this is a mirror situation that is happening. Right.
Oh, yeah. I think we're on the same page with this. Because in the previous episode, Andy Serkis made a point to say that he has like less than a year of his sentence left to serve.
Yes.
Also, it's notable that Andy Serkis, you know, he has some silver in his beard.
He's older.
You know, he's not the youngest guy in there either.
He's the person, like, this old man is who Andy Serkis is looking at as like, yeah, I'm going to be older when I get out of here, but look at this guy. He's going to get out of here. He did it as an old man. I can do it.
Yes.
But
and that is shattered.
Shattered. So brilliant writing. And using a trope. This is a trope to use this, but it is shorthand, and I accept it because it was done so beautifully. Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, we get more of the Olaf is slipping, you know, like his memory, like, we just talked about this. This is how much you have. You know, and everyone at the table is sort of worried about him, I think for themselves, but also because there is a genuine sense of camaraderie in the table, like the, you know, table he's at, where they are worried about him.
Yeah, there's a thing that happens in stories and in reality too, where like when you're kind of on the same like level playing field, like they're all in the same situation, like you can't help but care for each other. Like, you know, you're like, but it's a little more obvious with Andy Serkis and Olaf for various reasons. But yeah, like, you know, Serkis's character is very comfortable, and he's like, oh, I'm in charge. I'm getting out of here. And like all these like illusions of comfort, you know, are broken. But they feel like a team. It's nice. It's beautiful.
We get this very brief cut to, you know, the end of Deirdre's torturing of Bix, and the sort of on planet commander wants to kill the junkyard operator or owner, Pack.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, I'd like to see him hung, you know, just to show them who's in charge. And I remember watching this with my husband, and he was like, they already know who's in charge, right? Because like but that's the thing about this sort of mentality. There's been tons of research on, Nazi Germany soldiers and the things that they did and the things that they did under the situations, even voluntarily or going extreme and above measure. The Stanford prison experiment. There's other Stanford experiments that were done to really understand the effect of authority on other people. And when you are put in a position of othering people you have authority over. So high level Stanford prison experiment, if you'd never seen it, it will freak the hell out of you. Students from the psychology department in Stanford were either put into positions as prisoners or guards. So they all volunteered for this, and they were given arbitrarily a role. Prisoners were straight up arrested and brought to the Stanford prison that they created and were forced to live in this like prison situation. And they ended up having to end it after 2 days, mainly actually because of the extreme measures that the prisoners started to fall into and slip into their authoritarian roles.
Wow.
It's because the uniform itself and the authority that you have, and as soon as you start othering other people, you end up taking on this role. There's been another experiment that was done at Stanford where you basically had to apply electric shock therapy or electroshocks to another person. And you didn't know what you were doing exactly, but you had a person in authority telling you had to do this. And you basically gave enough shocks to kill another person. Even though the button was clearly labeled like this will kill somebody, and you would do it.
Yeah, it was like a fake thing, but they did it though
they
believed it, right?
Because they believed that the authority person was telling them to do it, so they had to.
Right.
And so like there's a big like problem with institutions and the way humans have been trained to identify people in authority situations and what the society itself is telling us is right, is the construct, right? When you're a soldier, you go and do things that you would never do as a civilian because you're in this situation where authority is telling you what to do. Yeah. And so I really want people to remember that like even the worst people in the Star Wars galaxy are there because the situation has put them there. Yeah. It was a long speech, sorry.
No, yeah. I think about like the last like 8 years or so in the US with like the whole like Black Lives Matter movement and all the stuff that has like brought that awareness to the public.
Yeah.
The sort of protests and the response to the protest and how it's like doesn't seem to be getting so much better as we just are more aware of it and see like the video evidence and stuff. And the real takeaway there is that you put a uniform on somebody, they are kind of cease to be human and behave as like you want to think that a human being would behave. And the sort of
they will behave like the culture expects them to behave. That's the key. And the dominator culture in like much of the West is white supremacist.
Right. And the psychological mechanism in people is to see it and they're like, this had to happen. We have to rationalize why these awful things happened. So let's say, comply, obey, all that bullshit that people do to justify it. So, I mean, it's a similar thing here where, in the context of like this show, we saw with Dedra, like she was a very like likable, sympathetic character for a while. And then like she gets like a measure of recognition for what she's done in service of the Empire. And then suddenly she, wears that uniform a little bit more proudly and sort of.
She's no longer one of countless supervisors in an ISB round table. She's now one of 2 or 3 specialty hand-picked supervisors that are updating the head supervisor on all of the things. Yeah. Okay. So that's really, really important because it shows the rise of fascism in somebody we identified with. Who hasn't been Dedra in a work situation, right? Who hasn't been sometimes Syril, right? Like sitting there with your mom, like ragging on you about not making the right life choices, etc. So it's really important that we are actually identifying with these people because they're going to show us that we could also fall. We're also susceptible to these things. And yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, there's no way back for them. Oh my goodness, there's so many ways back for them. It's just really important that we both see the fall and also the journey home. And I really hope we get that. These writers are smart enough to know that this is an important message that Star Wars needs to tell. Will they live through it? TBD. Honestly, Star Wars has a really bad problem with death by redemption. So I don't know, but I truthfully believe that we would not feel sad and sorry for Syril and Dedra if they were just going to be our villains. And they will be villains for a while, but there's more to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of 15-year-old boys out there watching Star Wars. So I think at this point in history, it's cool to see a show take like that whole sort of, you know, I mean, we have the radicalization stories happening throughout the series as well, but we also have that sort of like being, you know, the lure of fascism being shown, you know, so kind of in like a serious, mature way, right?
Yeah. And in a well, why wouldn't you want to be praised by your supervisor? Why wouldn't you want to do your best at your job kind of way? Yeah.
And not that fiction has to always like necessarily give you like a moral roadmap by which to live, but like again, Star Wars is a big deal to a lot of people, a lot of like 15-year-old boys out there who are very kind of vulnerable
and girls.
to you know, no
and
of course but I think of that sort of stereotypical Proud Boys, like that kind of you know, the Kyle Rittenhouse sort of you know, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about
a
like
lot of people have compared him, Syril, to that type of person.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like those sort of, you know, young boys who are like, you know, at the January 6th, like insurrection or whatever, doing like these awful things, you know, at this point in history. And it's a sort of patriarchal thing, you know, even if, you know, I'm trafficking in stereotypes here by doing the Proud Boys thing. You know, women but can be fascist.
It is
too,
fascinating that we are getting a version of literally a white feminist and a white incel.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Okay. Yeah. So, just briefly, let's talk about Andor, and then we can deal with the kind of like all the Mon Vel stuff together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we hear about the level 2 incident in the hallway. So they're waiting in the hallway, and they're rowdy, kind of like normal, and they're trying to gain control of the situation. And the power goes off. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. And the sign language people are like, it's going too fast. I don't know. The power goes off and everything is kind of like, what happened? What do you why do you think the power went off?
Well, I mean, we kind of get some explanation, but like the sort of symbolic thing that I think about is just how much Andy Serkis is like jarred out of his comfort here. You know, he begins to panic. And so even as he's saying, you know, basically like, you know, get in line, get on program, you know, whatever the terminology is, like, you can see him, he's sort of in denial. He's, I have like this like flow chart written out in my notes where he sort of goes from fear to denial. And he's at the fear stage at this point, right at the beginning of, he's sort of lost his, because these guys have been in here for God knows how long. Andy Serkis has probably been in here for a few years, couple years or whatever. I don't recall exactly, but you know, he's been there long enough to know that something unprecedented in their sort of little, fluorescent hellscape, like something weird is going on that is not familiar to him. And it triggers that fight or flight animal thing in him.
So this is like what we classically in a hero's journey, because we actually get to see Andy Serkis kind of go through a hero's journey, which is really cool, or start it,
right? On his face.
Yeah, exactly, right? This is classically what we hear when you get the sense that something is wrong in your world, right? Andy Serkis has made this his world, and this is like the power turning off from like a sort of nuts and bolts of the prison perspective. It's a floating prison. Where are they getting all the power kind of thing? I personally think that frying one floor took away all the power from the rest of the building.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's my thoughts is what happened, right?
Yeah.
I agree. It was just too much. So they fried everybody when they were in the hallway.
Yeah.
Right. So both the night shift and the day shift, when they do the 12-hour switch or whatever, that's what I think happened.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. It's like in the original Star Wars, that thing that you're talking about, that the world something is wrong with the world. There's like a sickness or whatever.
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker says, like, it's not that I like the Empire, I hate it, but there's nothing I can do about it right now. This show is all about what you can do about it. Which is very cool.
Or what level are you, Luke Skywalker, in the moment, right? Like, what is the thing that it takes you to get woken up?
Yeah.
Right. And again, that's my point about Dedra and about Syril. Because,
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Mon and Val. So Mon Mothma hears, as she has a very disappointing Senate session where she's like, we must discuss the Emperor's overreach. And then you see the lights like shut off. It just kind of reminds me a few times when I've done like live streams and like it hits like, I guess, a boring point in the conversation and I lose like 10 viewers or whatever. I'm like, oh God, what did I do? Because you can like kind of see the numbers when you're doing live streams all at once.
Sure.
It's sort of like that. Like people are like, oh no.
Chat's slowing down.
Yeah, unsubscribe from this conversation. Yeah, exactly. And so like she's super disappointed, but she gets some good news inside of her limo or her cool car, her cool speeder.
Yeah. Oh, I love your cousin has arrived or whatever at the embassy.
Your cousin has arrived. Oh, at the embassy here. Yes. And she arrives and she sees her daughter is like opening up her present from Auntie Val, who is Mon's cousin, but is
this is a huge surprise, right? We did not know this, did we?
Well, okay. So what did you and I know before this episode? We had a vibe that Luthen treated this girl like a daughter.
Yeah.
Right? We had that vibe. Yeah. You and I were like, whoa, okay. And yeah, so did my husband. He was like bugging me. He's like, what is going on with this relationship? Why, and that and the rich girl comment from last episode, Cinta, totally, they breadcrumbed us. They told us enough with this that we feel, yes, confirmed. Like we feel smart, you and I. And so they gave us enough that we're not shocked, right? That's good writing. That's solid, like basic writing where you give the audience enough breadcrumbs that when they see it, they're like, they look back and they're like, oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. So now we're just kind of like, oh, it makes sense that like Mon Mothma and Luthen, who like have no reason to kind of work together. Now we are in the sense that they might be related, right?
Yeah. They might be related. Yeah. They might be related.
Yeah. It's just kind of like a nice little, like, it feels like we're sort of getting what we want. Like, even
Luthen
if it's not the answer
her
we
like
expected.
a daughter out of respect for Mon Mothma, knowing that he needs Mon Mothma. That's also kind of the option, right?
Right.
Either way, they have this shared connection that they are concerned about.
Yeah, it's not like Cassian where he's like just some guy that he's like using as like a blunt instrument. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that like trying to be more gentle with her totally made sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, you know, you've been traveling for 6 months. Well, the empire doesn't rest, Mon. The rebellion comes first. We get what's left. Oh my god. What an angsty. I've been spurned by my lover, so I'm going to repeat her words to my cousin.
Yeah.
Cinta's words thrown back at Mon Mothma.
Yep.
What?
Well, and I was saying that thing earlier, like sort of off the top of my head about Syril like looking for human relationships to sort of replace the void of the institution that he feels, and like here we're kind of seeing the rebellion version of that, of like Vel, like not being happy about that like you can either be like really good at work or good in your relationships. It's hard to be good at both. That's a challenge for everyone.
It is. And we talked about this with the Cinta episode where like we where Cinta's like, so like it's only the rebellion. It's like, no, you can't get caught up in only the rebellion. It's like, why are you fighting for the rebellion? Why do you do these things? The relationships matter.
Yeah.
Right.
I was once accused of sexism on Twitter many years ago because I wrote a blog post on StarWars.com, and in it I sort of implied that in Claudia Gray's bloodline, Leia is sort of having to sort of choose between like her family and being like the greatest senator the galaxy has ever seen. And
I think that's really fair, and I think that's one of the problems.
It's
the solo
hard.
Organa household.
Their story. Han's like, why don't we go off and have an adventure, Leia? And I think that was in Bloodline where he's like, let's go.
He shows up and like there's the racing stuff that he's working on, and he's like, I don't have to be a racer, we could just leave. And she's like,
let's do some scoundrel shit out in space. And she's like, Han, like, it's good to show that tension, that it is a balancing act, and things are messy and difficult. Yeah.
I mean, you and I both work full time. We podcast, we have kids.
Kids
we're married, like we got all these things going on, the each of us.
Yeah.
And I had some major life things happen, and sometimes you just can't balance everything. Sometimes one particular thing needs a focus. That's fair. But if the rebellion needs your focus all the time, every day until this thing is won, that's like a whole generation.
Yeah, that's your life, because that's going to take a while.
And what is left, right? Who's left to come home, right? You have to make time in amongst the rebellion. I hope that's one of the things that's discovered through this, because I'm super invested in the Vel Cinta relationships. I just I want to see my space lesbians happy. Yeah.
The big heist episode where like all the shit hit the fan and everybody was, it was a lot of pew pew. Like the thing that stuck out to me from that episode was like, man, I really love those two as characters.
Yeah.
Like they're the new kind of like Poe, Kylo, Finn, Rey for me. Like I just really like those two. The caliber of performances in the show is like across the board, dynamite.
So good.
And I find Vel like so compelling to watch her kind of like constantly at war with all the shit that she's sort of juggling.
Yeah.
She's really good at that. So hopefully we see more of like Cinta's side of it, and it doesn't just sort of fizzle out.
No, I don't think so. The fact that Cinta was in the room without being in the room from a script perspective, from a character perspective, means that Cinta is still key. And Cinta's on the planet and watched Bix get captured. Like there's going to be like, I feel like Marva, who is like there and planning rebellion on her own, might figure out some sort of plan.
Yeah.
So like skipping back to Andor, we get this amazing scene where he's like badgering Kinto. He's like, don't Kino, or he's badgering Kino. Like, don't you see, like, have you ever thought about escaping? How many guards on each level? This is the first time we hear this, right?
Yeah.
How many days are left in your sentence? 217. Okay.
Yeah.
You think they care what we say? Nobody's listening, and this is where we get the title of the episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. Nobody cares about us. And we get this shot of the back of his head, right? We get the back of his head. And this is so key because this is the first of many backs of heads we see in this episode.
Oh, weird. Okay, interesting.
Isn't that cool? And so he turns away, right? We see his full back. And to me, like, he's in a situation where he is isolated. He believes his way is the only way. And it's a shorthand for the denial of the call. Right?
Yeah.
There's Andor, his projected mentor, I guess, is like his mentor. He's like, hey, Kino, we gotta go on an adventure. And Kino's like, nah, no, stop.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like it's Andor is like yelling at him, nobody's listening. Don't you understand? Like, wake up. Wake up. And he is isolated and alone, but like stuck in his version of the world. So that's really, really key. Okay. So remember what I said with that. Okay. Back to Deirdre.
Oh, with her right hand guy.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
guy.
So
Yeah.
well, no, this is when she's kind of showing that Andor, this was like the outcomes of the Bix interrogation, that they found out that Cassian had visited the planet.
Oh, and she's meeting with everybody at the
and he was clean shaven, and her second in command like jumps forward and is like, no, he was clean shaven, like, I'm assisting, I'm super helpful, I will stab you in the back. Like, don't you get that vibe? Don't you get that vibe? He wants her job.
Yeah. Yep.
And she's like, well, and he was flush with cash. Don't forget the being flush with cash and the Aldhani connection. And yeah, like they work really well together, but her second in command is shown to be incredibly eager to do what she can do, but better. And this is the first scene we see that. And the second point to this scene is super important, which is they talk about, well, have you interrogated his mother? And she's like, no. I'm going to leave her alone. She's fragile and he might come back for her. She's bait. And we literally get the second fish metaphor.
Oh, yeah. They're sort of connecting all the dots that, like, oh, the Aldhani thing, that was Andor. This is where they're realizing it.
But the mother being used as bait. Okay, so another fish thing.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna save her to use as a lure or whatever.
Yeah, like a net, lure, more fish metaphors, and there's a third fish metaphor. Anyways, it's great. So not directly, but they do something fun.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then they, back to Andor, and they're finishing up their shift. One thing I noticed when they kind of flash to the walkways between the center and where they stay, because it's kind of like the outer areas where they stay, or the inner areas where they stay, and the outer. Yeah, one or the other. But the lowest level is 1 and the highest level is 7. Right? Like, it's not like in reverse order where the highest level is 1 and the lowest level is 7. The lowest level is 1 and then 7 is the highest level. I thought that was really interesting. But they start to freak out about what happened in Unit 205.
Oh, gotcha.
What happened in 2.5? What happened in 2.5? It is the exact opposite of Andor's unit, 5-2.
Oh, okay, interesting. So the mirror thing.
It is the mirror thing, right? So this is like the triggering thing to say. This is the triggering thing to say. It happened to them. It could happen to us.
Yeah.
The night manager, Zinska, says, I heard they made trouble. And then Kino starts to freak out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And be like, oh no, we got to get everything in line. And Andor is like, Cassian's like, we need to be careful. They can't know that what we know.
Yeah. He like immediately, I think this is where he sort of immediately recognizes like what Circus is going through, what Kino's going through. And he immediately, he just wants to help him. He's like, we can't let them see us sweat or whatever that we, it's really brilliant. The sort of reversal of like, the guy who was keeping order is now like the one freaking out. And it's good.
And Andor is playing his mentor, right?
Sort of the Bodhisattva thing. I think you mentioned that before in this podcast at some point, like like the Trinity to Neo. For some reason, I always want to bring up the Matrix as like how to describe like the way these stories work. But there's always this sort of the white rabbit you got to follow, or
and it's the character that basically opened your eyes to the problems of the universe. Right.
Yep.
So we're back to Syril eating his cereal. Don't you love how those are like near rhymes?
Yeah.
Syril cereal.
They probably thought that was like so like some Monty Python humor when they were, writing that. That's just
Syril is so serious eating his cereal.
Yeah. They thought they had so much fun laughing at that at like 3 a.m. in the writer's room, I'll bet.
It makes me giggle.
It's so funny.
Every time I see him eating his cereal. But he is the shot opens and we see the back of his head.
Yeah, I do remember that one. Yeah,
right?
You're right.
So he hasn't done anything. He's stuck at where he is. Like he's not doing anything. And he is whoopified by his mother, right? Like, so he is a child, right? This is like the Buddhist idea that those people who haven't learned to care about others or have compassion are still children, and we should have empathy because they still haven't learned enough about life to grow and become adults. And he is treated like a child by his mother, right?
Children are very selfish. Children are like little tyrants, and it's very me. And the idea is to get them to adulthood, not like that.
You haven't been in through enough, I guess, bad situation to watch the suffering of others and to understand that you and others suffer and to have empathy for those things. You just haven't lived enough, right? And neither is Syril. He hasn't lived enough. And like we get like the laundry list of his complaints, like, like you shouldn't have left out dinner. You should have trusted me as an adult to tell you what I meant. And she's like, well, I don't know what you meant, and then like you searched my room and she's like, well, I was cleaning. Is like, and my private box.
Yeah.
Alex, what's in the box?
A diary? Is that what you're thinking?
I don't know. What's in his private box?
I don't know.
What's in a teenage boy's private box? Because they code Syril like a teenager.
I had a little somewhere I have it, I'm sure still, but somewhere I had this little like blue safe with like a little knob that, and it was like I would just like throw stuff of significance in there, and it would be things like a Back to the Future class ring that said Hill Valley High that I got at like Universal Studios when I was a kid, and like all the ticket stubs from the movies I saw with like girls and friends in high school and stuff like that, and little coins and trinkets. So the idea of like a teenage boy having a box, there is reality to that, because somewhere I still have mine.
I had like a box of like the notes from my friends that we would like write each other in class, or like
I had notes
like little weird like, hey, my friend was really into drawing anime characters that looked like me and my friends, and so I had those were in there. Like, it was just like, it wasn't particularly hidden, but it was like private, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people I've seen on the internet talk about this private box are really creeped out about it. And I just wanted to normalize it a little bit, because I actually think it's like the most normal thing. So
yeah. If I were to find my little blue safe that from when I was a kid, teenager, like, and open it up, it would have, the notes written by like all the girls that I like, quote unquote, went out with when I was 13, 14, 15, like just the notes they wrote me and stupid shit like that when you're a teenager. And that seems really significant at that time. And for him, I would imagine that it's
like, I saw somebody write like Deirdre's hair, isn't it? And stuff. And I'm like, no, he's literally such a baby. Like, he's coded like a child, like he's coded like a teenager. So you have to remember that he hasn't emotionally grown up enough to actually like deal with the world. That's really important. And so the private box is probably very innocent. People are very scared of Syril, and
sure,
I pity him mostly because he's so childlike.
He is very childlike, and he has one person in his life, essentially his mother, who like infantilizes him, like you've been saying. But so it's like he doesn't have somebody to talk to. That's like key. Right. He doesn't have somebody that he can be like, oh, man, I had this weird day at work and like this pretty girl interrogated me or whatever. No friends. No. Yeah.
And that's sad, isn't it?
It is sad. I find it. Yeah. I mean,
it's not like it's not like he's on the internet and like reading like how to like he's not. He's just like a very pitiful human in a lot of ways. And it sucks because there's a lot of people out there in the world that don't have social circles and just have, the one or two close relationships to them. And they haven't figured out a way to, have adult relationships.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
You say people are scared of Syril, and I think of, he reminds me, like, people are really similarly scared of the movie Fight Club and any discussion of that book or movie. And like, I don't want to give the writer too much credit, frankly, because I don't know. But often, like, when authors talk about their books and you defended their book, the author kind of disappoints you. But, that book and that movie is about men not having, it was an attempt apparently to write sort of the Joy Luck Club for men. Like, men don't have, and now of course, the stereotype is, well, they have podcasts now, but in 1999 or 1996, 30-year-old men working like white collar American jobs or, Canadian jobs. Sorry, excuse me. Like these sort of like average Joe guys, like dudes, they didn't have ways to, I suppose they had Dungeons and Dragons, they have softball leagues, and they have bowling, and they have
hanging out at the podcasts pub
now. But the stereotype was that, like, because of the patriarchy, because of toxic masculinity, they didn't have a way to connect with one another. And of course, so it becomes kind of a punchline.
I wonder if he was part of the like mythopoetic men's movement, like Robert Bly.
Oh,
yeah.
That would be.
It's a very similar time period. That's all. Like, it was kind of in the collective unconscious that men didn't have a way to share their emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, like, the answer is that the way that they come together and like have that sort of homosocial relationship is that they do terrorism and punch each other.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny in a weird, dark, satirical way, because it is a book about, how men are broken. Right. But anyway, I digress. I think Syril reminds me of that kind of
like vibe.
Yeah. He's lost. He doesn't have somewhere to hold on to besides, I want to be a cop, like, I want to be a good cop or something.
Yeah. And he brings up that he was promoted, shocking his mother. Oh, Uncle Harlow will be so proud.
Yeah.
And this is, and she gives him more cereal.
like he's allowed to eat now.
Yeah, and you're allowed to have more cereal, child. And he eats the little like puff that was like fell out of the bowl off the table. I just like my heart broke for him. I'm like dark horsing both Syril and Dedra, like joining the rebellion. I know, but everyone's like, Marie Claire, come on. And I'm like, they're giving them such unique lenses.
Yeah, I mean, this is like what the Force, home of the Sheevdemption and all that. So,
home of Sheevdemption.
I
am not the originator of Sheevdemption,
of course,
but
not.
I am maybe one of its loudest proponents.
Right, yeah, and
yes, I mean, to be fair, the original Sheevdemptionist is George Lucas, who said, everyone can be redeemed. What, everyone? You mean everyone? Yes, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. What, Lucifer was an angel, right? Is that?
Yeah.
I think that was the story.
All right. Well, no, I mean, but we wouldn't get this micro version in the prison if we weren't going to get a macro version somewhere else. Shockingly, people who you believe are the worst will be redeemed.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm not.
I was watching Breaking Bad last night, and you've got Walt, who I think of as kind of like a monster, and I'm not too fond of him. And he's talking to Jesse, and Jesse says to him, like, it's okay, man. I realized what I am. And Walt, who has just caused like the deaths of many, many people, says, what are you? And he says, I'm the bad guy. And the audience in that moment is realizing, well, Jesse's actually a pretty good dude after, given what he's been through. And so yeah, like the nice thing about stories is they're toying with their expectations. And so yeah, if in the middle now Dedra is like utterly monstrous, it kind of,
it doesn't lean to her being monstrous at the end. I just we empathize with both of them at some point. They never give us empathy for the monsters truthfully in Star Wars. Right? Like Palpatine, we're never like, oh, poor Palpatine. Because if we were, well, then we would want Sheevdemption.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah. And we never did get, his backstory.
That's why Kylo is so, controversial, because
yes,
he is so empathetic.
Yeah.
You can empathize with him. He's a lost little boy. He's stuck where he is. He's been in an abused situation. He's stuck as a cog in the wheel. I'm just going to let it sit with people. I'll stop bringing it up so much.
Sure.
No, I'll bring it up one more time. It's fine.
Yeah.
We get the Mon Mothma household family dinner or whatever.
Oh,
with
God.
Vel,
with the husband.
So we get like Mon and Vel and Perrin and Lita, and yeah, we get there like, oh, you're only here one night. You're getting older. You got to find a husband.
Yeah, when are you going to get a man? And she's like, I don't really have much use for that.
Yeah, and we get like, the you could, find a widower, I guess, because all the good ones are taken. And you get this like beautiful Mon Mothma smirk.
like she can't stand the guy. Yeah.
He's referring to himself, and she's like, oh yeah. But also you get a pre-smirk where she understands that Vel is not into men.
right. Yeah. There's like the first thing is sort of like the wink about the queer, and then just the fact that I don't know, she's got a sense of humor about the fact that like her and her husband don't have like a great chemistry because they got together when they were like 15 or whatever.
Yeah,
so
married when you were 15. Oh God, that's the worst. And Te Koma is like he subtly like pokes at her to say, oh, Chandrillan's around here. You could hook up with Te Koma.
Yeah.
mother's old boyfriend. Is that what you told her? Like, oh my goodness, so good.
Yeah, that's another example of something that we picked up on, even though it was never really evidenced at all. It was just in the performances, I think.
Yeah. Well, and Mon denies it, right? They're like, we were in grade school together. We were just friends, like friends who were like, yeah. But in Perrin's mind, Tay is a romantic rival of sorts. Right? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he's like a banker and he's not bad looking. So
yeah. And we get this side conversation with Vel and Mon about what, they're about to say goodbye. And so she's like, Tay? It's like, oh, I needed money. It's like, I don't have time for anything else. Seriously. Like, I really love that moment because it's like, it felt real, like it felt like two really good friends who were family, sisters, cousins, etc. Like they felt good.
Oh, Vel like asks if she's having an affair. Yeah, that was good. I forgot about that beat.
Yeah. And then, they're like, she's like, please go play a spoiled rich girl. Like, just be safe, for a bit. And she's like, no, I got more important things to do. We're fighting against the dark. We're doing something with our lives.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like the Alfred telling Bruce Wayne to be like more of a
date,
playboy, 20-something playboy billionaire and less of a
like go and
Batman.
Experience life, right? Go and remember what all of this is for.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, right? But this is really important because we get the hug and then we fade out, or we get the this gorgeous shot of her in between her two kind of gateway doorways, like archways. They're 10-sided doors, which is really interesting, both of them. It's really interesting architecture. But we get the shot of the back of her head and her full back, which consistently has been used in this episode to show a few things, i.e., she's so sure about her way. She's got to use Tay-Koma. She doesn't agree with Vel, who's going off on adventures. The call to adventure, right? Mon, you have to do more. Mon, you can't just sit here in your whatever you're doing and be okay with trying to play both. You have to accept that you're going to have to become more active like Vel, right?
Yeah.
And to truthfully transform yourself in the universe, right? You have to be active. And she's comfortable with hiding, right? And so she's between this gateway and is like unwilling to walk through either of them and has her back to adventure, to the doorway that Vel just walked through.
Yeah.
What a talk about consistent symbolism through the whole show.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's good. And it's very, it's like very subtle and classical, like, any other like prestige TV show that we would talk about. Like
the visual symbolism entirely done probably by the director, unless it was written in the script, right? Which
right
is cool. Good pairing, these two. Toby and Bo.
Yeah, definitely.
Can't wait for next episode. The absolute, finishing of this arc, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be insane. I think. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
So we get the Syril Dedra conversation outside the ISB headquarters.
It's kind of like Marty McFly's dad, George, telling his mother, like, "You're my density." Anyway.
Oh my God. So many people
Lorraine.
like felt so uncomfortable with this whole thing.
She's like, "Have you been stalking me?" Basically, right? And he's just like, "No, I've just been like trying to run into you." Like I
just wanted to thank you for the promotion. I didn't do that. I just made sure that she just made sure that there wasn't adverse effects by the Empire. You had a clean bill of health, right? The idea that she didn't want to harm him by just interacting with him, because interactions with the ISB are harmful. Even if you're not like, she left him better than he deserved to be, probably, right? based on what he did.
Sure.
And he himself sought that as, the connection that they had. I've been thinking about our conversation. That wasn't a conversation. He's been seeking connection and commonality with other people. And she's the first person that he gave any sort of like communication to, and she reciprocated in any sort of way. Right? Ever.
Yeah.
And how he talks about her and his place in the universe is a lot like the Force.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right? Like I have this deluded belief that I'm part of something bigger.
Yeah.
That there's something meant for me. That there is something out there.
Yeah.
And he has hope.
Right.
And people are like, he's an incel. And that's how you're supposed to read it. Because we're supposed to see all of these different versions of Syril and Dedra, right? Like Dedra herself is this, woman trying to play in a man's world and is getting the classical, like, I'm a man and, I'm playing in the man's world and I can play the game. But she's going to find out that the reward is fake. It's false, right? That has to happen. Right. We're getting this paired journey with the two of them is so interesting because we see both a woman and a man go through the fascist side of the machine.
Yeah. And she's in denial about all this, but like when he says the confession of like, I saw purpose and renewed hope in you, like she like really reacts to it and kind of like studies his face and like has this kind of like emotional, surprise, like, it's not like she believes every word that she's saying when she's just kind of like, no, like get out of here, you crazy. Like, she responds in like the way that, there's kind of, there's something she likes in him, or she probably,
do you ship it?
I mean, I don't know if I would say that. I guess so. I mean, yeah, I think that's where they're
more
going.
Problematic a ship. So
I think that's where they're going. I mean, I think that's what they're doing.
They look at each other directly in the eyes. It's really fascinating how they framed that scene, and he touches her.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like he holds her back from moving forward to tell her that like he was relieved to get a second chance, and she did this to him, and that he felt this connection with her. Like it was really interesting, and she's like, "Hey, screw off, sir."
Yeah,
and she's actually kind of shaken by the situation. I don't know where they're going with this, but it's really interesting, and the shared connection aspect and the like seeking, I don't know, commonality with other people, is not necessarily something that like the Empire wants. Like, you don't want people to have empathy for other people, right? You're doing your good job for the service of the Empire. They don't want you to like empathize, right? And Syril is seeing his anima.
Yeah. It's a very like Last Jedi situation where the expected thing is that Rey goes to Ahch-To and Luke Skywalker is the answer to all our problems, and then people get sort of a little bit heated about the fact that Kylo is really where she like finds a connection and recognizes, and so I think that's what they're doing here, where it's like it's just sort of unexpected that the scary ISB woman who interrogated him and was going to squash him like a bug and then didn't, it's compelling that she's sort of like taken aback by his and
she's actually like kind of jarred by it too. Like he intimidated her, and really like he has zero power. Right? Like, but why was that so scary, right? And people are genuinely like there's a lot of controversy around these two, but this is such a compelling part of the story that they're telling that we're like invested in these characters. So I don't, again, prove me wrong, show, but I look forward to seeing them both live happily ever after.
I mean, I was saying earlier how like
you don't show a teenage boy not being able to grow up and become a fully realized man, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you don't show a friggin' insert for the Karens of the world who you kind of empathize with at the beginning, but turns into a full fascist Karen. Apologies to all the good Karens out there. Sorry. But you know what I'm saying? Like, that it doesn't figure out a way to get out of that situation.
Yeah. I mean, she similarly doesn't really have anybody and like an authentic relationship in her life that's like, a friend or, and what have you.
We get that immediately in sharp contrast when she shows up in her office kind of shaken, and her second in command has anticipated her needs and has already, gotten the guy, the rebel pilot, to steer guard, and has already dispatched Dr. Gorsht for her, and has already done all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not that that's necessarily bad if you have a trusted situation, but I get a bad vibe from this guy.
Yeah. You were talking earlier too about how all the guys like at the station with Cassian and Olaf and that crew, like they're all kind of like equal, like they're all in it together, and everybody in a prison. You talked about them not having shoes on; they're all wearing the same uniform. The contrast to that is that in an empire, you've got a power structure. And then anytime you have a power structure, you have, aspiration, careful not to choke on your aspirations, director, that whole thing. Like, so inherently you kind of can't trust that guy because the system is built to be like, career advancement, let's get that.
Yeah. Just like what you talked about, like how capitalism is built to have ever expanding margins, right? Like that, the shareholders must be satisfied. Well, imperialism is built on expansion, further control. And the only way that you have more control and more, order in your own life is moving up the chain, right? Having more power and control over others.
Yeah. And historically, traditionally, if there's a kingdom, it's like you want to be that king because everybody else has it way worse than him. And so, whereas in the prison, they're equal. And so they work together for a common goal. And I think that's all intentional. They're doing all of this.
All intentional. Yeah. And like all of the people who are making the cogs can awaken and do their work together to do something else. Right. Yeah.
I think of that moment in The Last Jedi too, where they're like looking for an escape from the mine, and everybody sort of looks to Leia as their leader, and she says, "What are you looking at me for? Follow him," as if to say, Poe and all of you are my equal. I kind of like that thought that the rebellion should, if it's healthy, they're all kind of on level ground, like that prison.
Like
I could be wrong about that.
An alliance.
An alliance. There you go.
An alliance, a rebel alliance. We also have the scene with Mon Mothma and Koma about the loan and the deposit, and sort of the impending urgency of her needing to do something. What did I say last episode about this? He's totes gonna steal her money.
Yeah.
Well, he's gonna force her into a bad loan.
Yeah, he's like already talked to like basically like an organized crime figure, a very sort of Trumpian sounding shady guy who Skulden. Yeah. When they said the name, I immediately just pictured Trump. I don't know. My brain is very poisoned. But
she calls him a thug, and he wants to meet her at the embassy and be official.
Yeah, it's like this very mundane scene for Star Wars where they're like talking about like
Loans and like avoiding
cooking the
taxes.
books and like, oh, you need a paper trail of like, account for all your income and stuff, and, fearing the revenue service and all that. So I don't know, I really liked the scene. I thought it was kind of is fun that Star Wars is getting down to that level of
the nitty-gritty of accounting.
yeah, like, I mean, we got some of this when they were planning the heist and stuff in the like episode 4 and whatnot, but yeah, like they're taking the Star Wars universe, quote unquote, like seriously at such a granular level, and it's so fun because before you would kind of think of that as being something that like somebody running like a tabletop Star Wars campaign with their friends,
It is like a paragraph in a book.
Right,
right? But they're actually spending the time to tell us how the universe works, which is so good.
Yeah.
It just feels more lived in.
Yeah. Like, Pablo Hidalgo and people like that from Lucasfilm, or, people who are very kind of like, I don't know, think of things that I don't think of typically, they like to point out, poke holes in things. And there's not a lot of holes in Andor, it's not like, sort of hand wavy magical stuff of like, like if they were going to do some kind of weird light speed thing, like they'd lay it all out for you first, and you would know the rules exactly. And that's kind of exciting.
It is. It feels real. And I appreciate that just for that sake. And it feels different than the original trilogy, which there was some hand waving, literally.
Yeah, sure.
But that's okay.
Yeah, it's never bothered me for sure. But it's like just that general sense that people are sort of like, this could be a science fiction show in any universe. I think there's some truth to that whole idea.
So we go back to Dedra and the ISB, and, they're discussing the pilot for the rebel group and, trying to talk about, how this guy belongs to Anton Krieger's group, who we heard about when Saw and Luthen talked about him last episode. We know nothing about Anton Krieger except that Saw didn't want to work with him. And he's planning an attack on Spellhaus, which is a base, right? And I love the names that they have, like Steerguard.
Steerguard, I love that.
The ship, construction place, right? Steerguard, so we protect the steering or the ships. Spellhaus is like the magic house in a way, it's got that vibe. I'm like, what is in Spellhaus? I want to know what's in Spellhaus now. It's super fascinating, the terms. There's two things about this scene that were really, really interesting to me. Her second in command and a friend come in late to support her. Sorry, we were out offsite, randomly. It's very weird. I feel like Deirdre's going to get up into a situation where she has to rely on Syril. I just feel like that's what's going to happen. And then the second thing is that, she puts into action sort of like the poisoned fish or something like that, because she's like, okay, we have this rebel pilot, we're gonna kill him and have him towed back to destroy, hurt his ship and have him towed back to Anton Krieger.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
right, so it's like bait but it's in a way that like a dead fish. Really interesting, right? So
yeah,
her methods are very subtle and kind of too advanced for the Empire, it feels like sometimes.
Sure, yeah.
She's very smart. And I do think that she might get caught up in playing in a man's world, because she's literally the only woman in any of these rooms ever.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know, the title of the episode's Nobody's Listening, and that has a bunch of different meanings inherent, but also she is kind of like the Imperial who does listen and picks up on things,
Yeah. And
She
only
kinda,
is she believed in all three situations in that round room when she speaks with her supervisor, when her second in command speaks up and supports her.
oh, yeah, I see what you mean. When,
So again, empire and patriarchy support each other,
yeah.
right? So she's only able to be successful when her second in command like adds in his 2 cents
Hmm.
every single time.
Yeah.
Annoying.
Yeah. I mean, like when I first heard the term like mansplaining, like described in detail or whatever, like, 9 years ago or whatever it was, like there was this notion that like, a woman would say something and be correct. And then like the guy would just repeat it verbatim and then get credit for saying it right. Like,
Yeah.
so they're just
Like
showing us
she's
that, I
getting
guess.
credit, but he's contributing in such a major way instead of letting her say everything.
Hmm.
Right? It's just fascinating to watch. I don't know if it's going anywhere, but it is still interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's close out Andor with what's happening in the prison.
Yeah.
Olaf starts to have an attack of some sort, and like certainly that like they're doing the they during the punishment of the lowest table, he starts to like fall, right? And he's having things, they protect him from the surveillance, and they protect him from falling so that he doesn't
Yeah.
get in trouble. And then as they're on their way back in the hallway, he fully falls.
Yeah.
And he's in like the pieta position with Cassian. But Kino really cares. He's like, no, come on, man. You only have a few shifts left. Like, you're me.
Yeah, you're
Right?
me in like a
You're
few
me.
months or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and he calls the med tech. He's like, we just have to get him going. He's the dream. He's gonna get out of here, right? And then of course this
Yeah.
is retiree, which he only had a few shifts left.
Yeah.
And Kino comments to the med tech that shows up like, haven't seen you in a while. And he's like, like just there's nothing to save here, guys. He's had a massive stroke. I can't help him. I can't help anyone. Oh my God. So sad. What's the point in healing people if there is no escape? This really makes me feel like the game Hades. There is no escape.
I love it.
Right? No matter what level you're on, you die.
Yeah.
And you return to the beginning. And like the med tech is warning him, like Kino specifically speaking to, right? Like this is such a good scene because Kino, he's speaking to him and he's like, another week like this, holds his shoulders. Everyone will wish they were him. Hold his shoulders, hold his legs.
Yeah.
And then he kills him with a drug.
Yeah. It's like a morphine overdose type situation where it's
Something,
just
something like that.
Real grim. Like you've got like basically like a mass execution and then like euthanasia in an episode of Star Wars. It's just like,
and to me, this is in Kino's hands. He sees the death of himself, right?
yeah.
And Andor too, because like they're connected to Olaf in his death, right? They're holding him, his feet and his hands, right? Like you got to hold his shoulders, you got to hold his legs. They're connected to that death. And so to me, this is the catabasis. This is like the death of self. This is the ego death that you experience, right? Any thought that you had that really it's down to you will become like Olaf or you will escape. Those are your only two choices. And in fact, the med tech says it's going to happen sooner than you think. Give it a week, right? What happened down on 2? They released somebody from 4, so higher up, right, in the building, and they were brought to 2. They were brought lower in the building, right?
Yeah, I feel like we need to unpack that because I have like various ideas. Like it's kind of it is like kind of a puzzler, right? Like you don't know quite like the why of this, right? And that's intentional. Like somebody made a mistake. And yeah, it was like they were supposed to get out, and then like a day later they're back on a different level. And it's like,
I mean, I think that it just comes down to the fact that it doesn't, they had already expanded their sentences, and something about the PROD, right? The order that came out basically said, actually, we don't need these prisoners back in society.
yeah, I had in my notes like this idea that, like, you know, on some level of metaphor, it's like a criminal is a rebel, and like there's no curing like a rebel. Like there's no
Right.
no
Like,
mercy for.
they've already decided to break the social contract.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
On some level, right? And also it
mhm.
doesn't service totalitarian regimes to allow for people who balk at the laws to live free.
Okay.
Right? Like if you're willing to not obey the absolute order, it doesn't benefit them to have you be free.
Sure. I also had the thought of like if they were supposed to be released and then they came back sort of very quickly, like they might be suspicious of like, okay, this is a guy who's trying to like break out other people, and so it's like the whole rotten apple spoiling the bunch thing, like just kill them all to be safe, you know. But it's a little vague how, like the why of it, I guess. But I mean, think we'll get more.
I get the impression that it just the mistake happened. Literally, somebody was supposed to be released, and it caused like, oh, nobody's getting out of here, and then they rioted, but they weren't prepared, like Cassian is.
Gotcha. Yeah. So somebody was supposed to be released, and because the prison is so sort of like unmanaged, like it's so like self-governing, like that they just ended up going to the wrong floor, and then so that incited a riot. Maybe
they're stretched, right? We saw that when Cassian came in, that they didn't have enough guards to actually do the prisoner like bringing in that they were supposed to.
Right.
And I also think that it could also be a situation where the rules have changed and it freaked people out or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw like how Kino freaked out, like. So maybe it just triggered a riot, like whatever happened, whatever the mistake was.
Yeah, which is not uncommon in prisons, right? Like
I'm sure that they break out for very weird reasons. Yeah,
or like and it's very depressing, and like this is the prophecy, right? This is the mirror that we see. At least your friend is free now. Right, that's what the vet tech says.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Kino's like, wait, that friend is me.
Right.
This is how I'm going to end up. And then we get as they stand to walk away, how many guards on each level? Never more than 12. Yeah. And in this circumstance, although Andor is facing the back of Kino's head, we see Kino's face as the audience. Mm-hmm. So we know that he is facing towards resolve and adventure.
Yeah.
So cool. Love.
Yeah. Earlier you're talking about like macro and micro. And this idea that, it's cool to see him. You know, he's an example of somebody we would have considered like the enemy in the beginning, but he sort of represents this idea. Knights of the Old Republic Bastila says that thing about what greater weapon is there than to turn an enemy to your cause, and we see that continually in the Disney era of Star Wars, where an Imperial asset who's very competent, like Iden Versio or whoever, becomes really valuable in the rebellion, which is kind of what you keep saying about Syril and Dedra. So, it's kind of fun to think in terms of, Kino is this kind of by the book Syril, like, sort of dickhead, who's
Wedge Antilles started out as an Imperial pilot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. We haven't actually seen many of these stories where they turn around and they were doing bad stuff. Oh my God, they're so unredeemable. Are they? I don't know. I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah. We did get Riva, so more of that would be nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Redemption for all. It's like Christmas.
and sort of divorced from like the whole like Jedi dark side kind of continuum too, like, you know,
the regular old gray choices that everyone has to
people.
make, and they're stuck in the machine, right? How do you get unstuck from the machine? Yeah.
Good stuff. Good
Redemption
TV show.
for all, and for all a good night. It's not Christmas yet, but you know. Any final thoughts, Alex Kane?
Oh, I'm not sure. I just
this is great. This is a great episode, right?
Yeah, I think this was my most fun that I've had talking about Andor, maybe. I don't know why that is, but you know, I just feel like
I've had a lot of fun talking about Andor.
Yeah, same. Yeah, this was good.
It's just
Andy Serkis.
Actually, you know what? Everybody in the cast is amazing.
Yeah. I just didn't expect him to blow me away the way he has. And I should expect him. Yeah, I mean, I should have expected it, but he really surprised me. He's so good here.
He's so good. Yeah. And he's really showing his CG model replacement acting chops that he had for Gollum, and he had for Snoke, and he had for all of these other characters that he's played that, or he's been replaced by a digitally animated character. But we actually get to see it, which is good, as him. Yeah.
I always thought he was robbed of like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, like blew my mind. And I always thought he should have been recognized for that a little bit more than he perhaps was,
I feel like he got a lot of recognition for Gollum, and really he is the template by which, digitally animated characters and people who do motion capture deserve to get acting awards.
Yeah.
I
mean, the movie Avatar, people feel different ways about it, but it did make a lot of money, and it does, it's getting this big sequel. It's sort of an event, of a kind. And I don't think you get Avatar without Gollum, is my point there. That. Yeah. I mean, it kind of took what was started with Ahmed Best and Jar Jar Binks and really brought a different level of technological sophistication to it, and bridged that gap between animation and performance a little bit more. So
yep, gotta remember George and John Cameron are besties.
Yeah.
Sorry, George and James Cameron are besties.
Yeah.
Not John. Anyways, well, that wraps up episode 9. Nobody's listening of Andor. Alex Kane, where can people find you if they're looking for you and all of your stuff?
I'm on Twitter for the time being, I guess.
Until Twitter implodes.
At Alex J. Kane, Kane, and I'm here and there. I have a little itch.io page. I think it's alexjkane.itch.io, and I have a little Skyrim game on there. And where else am I? That's about it right now. I'm
Instagram
a little bit, posting pictures of my kid and my jack-o'-lantern, both my kids and my dog and my jack-o'-lantern and my anyway.
Very personal photos,
Yes.
But thank you everyone for listening. We look forward to seeing the conclusion of this arc and the incredible collaboration between Bo and Toby, which we heart Bo and Toby. All right, everyone. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Cheryl, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can Connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.